You know, there are moments in life when you realize that doing the right thing might cost you everything you hold dear. I'm 72 years old, and I thought I'd seen it all. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened last Tuesday. Let me back up a bit. My husband Richard built his accounting firm from the ground up over 30 years ago. He's what you'd call a self-made man, proud, stubborn, and absolutely convinced that his way is the only way. We've been married for 48 years, and I've learned to pick my battles. But this time, I couldn't just stand by and watch. It happened 6 months ago, right before Thanksgiving. Richard came home that evening, loosened his tie with that sharp tug he does when he's fired up about something, and announced at dinner that he'd let Jennifer go. "Who's Jennifer?" asked our daughter-in-law Melissa, passing the green bean casserole to our son, Tom. "My office manager," Richard said, cutting into his pot roast with more force than necessary. "Been with me for 8 years, but she made a mistake that cost us a client. I don't tolerate incompetence." I felt my stomach drop. I knew Jennifer. I'd met her at the company Christmas parties, and she'd always been so kind, asking about my grandchildren and remembering little details. She had 2 kids in middle school and a husband who'd been laid off from the auto plant last year. "What kind of mistake?" I asked quietly. Richard waved his hand dismissively. "Filed some paperwork late. The client got hit with a penalty. It's done, Margaret. I'm not discussing it further." But I couldn't let it go. That night, lying in bed while Richard snored beside me, I stared at the ceiling of our bedroom in our Columbus suburb, watching the shadows from the streetlight dance across the crown molding. Jennifer had seemed so conscientious. What if there was more to the story? The next morning, after Richard left for the office, I did something I'd never done before. I called Jennifer. Her voice was thick when she answered, like she'd been crying. "Mrs. Morrison? Please call me Margaret," I said, my heart racing. "Jennifer, I heard what happened. I'm so sorry." There was a long pause. Then in a rush it all came out. Her mother had been hospitalized with a stroke the week before. Jennifer had been at the hospital trying to manage everything when the deadline approached. She'd asked Richard for an extension, just 2 days, but he'd refused. She'd stayed up all night trying to finish, but in her exhausted state, she'd submitted the wrong form first and had to resubmit, causing the delay. "I tried to explain," she whispered, "but he wouldn't listen. And now, Mrs. Morrison, I don't know how we're going to make it. The severance was only 2 weeks, and with my mom's medical bills, I made a decision right then that would change everything. Jennifer, don't worry about the references. I'm going to help you." Over the next few months, I became someone I didn't recognize, a woman with secrets. I used my own savings, the money I'd inherited from my mother, to help Jennifer cover her bills while she job searched. I wrote her glowing references, using my connections from years of volunteer work and community involvement. I met her at the library, at coffee shops across town, anywhere Richard wouldn't spot us. My granddaughter, Emma, caught me once at Starbucks with Jennifer. Emma's 16, sharp as a tack, with her grandmother's intuition. "Grandma, who was that?" she asked when Jennifer left. I stirred my latte, watching the foam swirl. "Someone who needed a friend, sweetheart." Emma studied me with those knowing eyes. "Does Grandpa know?" "Some things," I said carefully. "We do because they're right, even when they're hard. Remember that, Emma." She nodded slowly, and I knew she wouldn't tell, but keeping secrets takes a toll. Richard and I have always been honest with each other, or so I thought. Every time he complained about finding a replacement for Jennifer. Every time he ranted about people who can't handle pressure, I bit my tongue until it bled. Our son Tom noticed the tension. "Mom, you okay?" he asked one Sunday after church, as we stood in our driveway. The January wind cut through our coats, and the neighbor's inflatable snowman bobbed in their yard. "You and Dad seem off." "Just winter blues," I lied, hugging my coat tighter. "You know how these Ohio winters get to me." But then came last Tuesday. I was in the kitchen making my famous chicken noodle soup, the one my own grandmother taught me, with extra dill and those thick egg noodles from the farmer's market. Richard was in his study, working from home because of the snowstorm that had blanketed our neighborhood overnight. Our street looked like a Christmas card, everything soft and white and quiet. The doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on my apron, the one Emma made me in home ec, with slightly crooked stitching that I treasure, and headed to the front door, expecting maybe our neighbor Bob returning the snowblower. It was Jennifer, but not the Jennifer I'd been meeting at coffee shops. This Jennifer was wearing a professional suit, her hair styled, her shoulders back, and she wasn't alone. Standing beside her was a distinguished-looking man in an expensive overcoat. "Margaret," she said, her voice steady and warm, "I'm sorry to come by unannounced. This is Marcus Weatherby. The name hit me like a freight train. Marcus Weatherby owned Weatherby Associates, the biggest accounting firm in Central Ohio. Richard had been trying to get his attention for years. "Mrs. Morrison," Marcus said, extending his hand, "your friend Jennifer has told me a great deal about you. May we come in?" I stood there frozen, my mind racing. Richard was right down the hall. The soup was boiling over. The whole world seemed to tilt on its axis. I started, but then Richard's voice boomed from behind me. "Margaret, who's at the—" He stopped dead when he saw Jennifer. The silence stretched like taffy. I watched Richard's face cycle through surprise, confusion, and then anger as he registered Jennifer standing on our front porch with Marcus Weatherby. "What is this?" Richard's voice was ice. Jennifer looked at me, and in her eyes I saw something that gave me courage, gratitude, strength, the kind of backbone that comes from surviving something terrible and coming out the other side. "Mr. Morrison," Marcus said smoothly, "I hope you don't mind the intrusion. Jennifer has been working for me for the past month, and she's quite remarkable. She's told me about her time with your firm, and I wanted to meet the family that helped her during her transition." Richard's eyes snapped to me. "Family? Your wife," Marcus continued, oblivious to the bomb he'd just dropped, "has been a tremendous support to Jennifer. Her recommendation letter was one of the most compelling I've ever received. In fact, we're here because Jennifer has closed a deal with Riverside Manufacturing, one of the biggest accounts in the region, and she wanted to thank Margaret in person and share the good news." I watched Richard's face, saw the moment he understood, saw the betrayal register, followed by something else, something I couldn't quite read. "Richard," I said quietly, finding my voice, "can we talk? Inside?" Marcus, sensing the tension, touched Jennifer's arm. "Perhaps we should come back another time." "No," Richard said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. He was staring at Jennifer, really looking at her, maybe for the first time. "Come in, it's freezing out there." What happened next, in our living room that still had Emma's art projects on the mantel and Tom's old football trophies on the bookshelf, was something I never expected. Richard listened as Jennifer explained her mother's stroke, the impossible choice she'd faced, the mistake she'd made in her exhaustion. Marcus watched Rick hard, carefully, and I realized this wasn't just a thank you visit. This was a test. When Jennifer finished, Richard was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something I'd only seen him do a handful of times in nearly 5 decades. He admitted he was wrong. "I should have listened," he said, his voice rough. I was under pressure myself, and I took it out on you. That was wrong." Jennifer nodded, accepting his words with grace. But then Marcus Weatherby dropped his own bomb. "Richard, I'm here with another purpose. I'm looking to acquire smaller, well-established firms to expand my regional presence. Jennifer has suggested yours, but I need to know, would you be willing to work for someone else? To let go of some of that control you're famous for?" I looked at Richard, this man I'd married when we were both young and stupid and fearless. I saw the pride warring with something else. Maybe wisdom, maybe exhaustion, maybe just the understanding that sometimes the help we need comes from the most unexpected places. "I'd need to think about it," Richard said finally. "Of course," Marcus said, standing. "Jennifer, shall we?" As they headed to the door, Jennifer caught my hand. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." After they left, Richard and I stood in the hallway. The soup had burned, the snow kept falling, everything felt different. "How much?" he asked quietly. 15,000, I admitted, "from Mom's inheritance." He nodded slowly. "You believed in her more than I did. I believed in giving her a chance." Richard looked at me, really looked at me, the way he used to when we were dating. "I've been an ass." "Yes," I agreed, "but you apologized, that's a start." He pulled me into a hug, and we stood there while the grandfather clock ticked in the living room and the soup pot cooled on the stove. But here's the thing that's keeping me up at night. Marcus Weatherby's offer came with a condition that he mentioned as he was leaving, one that Jennifer didn't know about. He pulled me aside at the door and said, "There's another firm interested in Richard's practice. They've offered more money, but less integrity. The decision will tell me everything I need to know about whether your husband has really learned this lesson. Richard doesn't know about the competing offer. Marcus will call him tomorrow, and I have no idea what my husband will choose, or what it will mean for us if he chooses wrong. Some secrets you keep to protect people. But some secrets, I'm learning, have the power to change everything. I guess we'll find out which kind this is, to be continued."